So the first thing we're going to do is prepare our roasted garlic for all of our sous vide applications. It's very important not to use raw garlic in this process, and that is for two reasons. The first one is the flavor that comes out from the raw garlic. It won't transmit well at these low temperatures. And the second reason is because raw garlic at these low temperatures does carry the risk of botulism, and we don't want any of that in our cooking. So we're going to get ahead of garlic. We're going to roast it in the oven for about 30 minutes. And then we're going to pop out the garlic cloves, and we can use these in our sous vide applications. Now we're going to prepare the strip steak for sealing. And what we need to do is we need to take the steak, we need to season, and we're going to sear the steak before it goes into the sous vide bath. There are several different methods for this. You don't have to do this pre-sear part. It's just something that I like. So what we need to do is we need to take our steak and we're just going to season well with salt and pepper. This steak is about 1 inch thick, and it's the thickness of the steak which will determine how long you have to cook the steak for. So the thicker the steak, the longer it will take, the thinner the shorter. So this one is going to take around an hour and a half to reach full temperature. If it's much thicker, it's going to take longer. It's going to take 4 or 5 hours. So I like to keep this 1 inch around an hour and a half until it reaches temp. Okay, so now we have the steak seasoned. We're going to give this a quick sear now. It's very, very important that we get this pan at temperature before we add any fat or oil. All right, so now my pan is at temperature. I'm going to add some canola oil. I'm using canola oil, but you can use any high heat smoking oil. In goes our steak. Just making sure we've got a beautiful, even coloring on the steak. And then we're going to flip, do the other side. So now we have the steak fully seared. We're going to leave it to cool just for about 10 minutes. It's very important not to put hot meat into a vacuum sealer because it will suck out all of the juices that are lively and moving around in there. So we're going to leave this to cool for around 10 minutes, and then we're going to place all of our aromatics in the bag, and then we can go ahead and do the vacuum sealing process. So now the steak has cooled a little while, we're going to place all of our ingredients into our bag. Now I'm using these polypropylene sous vide bags, which are specially designed for sous vide applications. If you cannot get hold of these, or if you don't have a vacuum sealer, you can use a Ziploc bag. So we're going to take the steak, I'm going to place it in the bag. So it's very important when we're dealing with low temperature cooking that we make sure this is completely safe. And the one part of sous vide that can be unsafe is when bacteria gets into our product before the cooking process. So we have to make sure that the bags are nice and clean inside and out, make sure we're using utensils with our products, no dirty fingers, make sure everything is clean and sanitary. That's the most important thing with sous vide. So we're going to put the steak inside the bag. We're going to take one of our roasted garlic cloves that we made earlier on, and some thyme. With the aromatics, you only need around 25% that you would normally use in a traditional cooking process. The flavor from these aromatics have nowhere to go, so they're going to be extremely strong inside this bag. And what we don't want to do is we don't want the steak to be overwhelmed with the flavor of thyme and garlic. So just 25% of what you would normally use, and you can do that as an eyeball, into the bag, and then we're ready to seal. And when you're placing the aromatics in the bag also, you want to make sure they're away from the protein or away from the product. If, for example, the garlic is on top of the steak and it gets sealed under pressure, it will actually make an indentation into the steak. And the same thing with the thyme, you'll be able to see sort of the leaves of the thyme in the steak. So we don't want that. So we're just going to push it to one side, and then we're ready to seal. So now the water bath is at the correct temperature. We've waited for it to come up to temperature. It's where we need it. And we're going to take our product, which has been sealed, and now we just place it in the bath, and we're going to leave it to cook. So now we're ready to prepare the madras spiced carrot. So for this we have some yellow and orange carrots, some unsalted butter, a little madras curry powder, and some salt. We're going to start by preparing the carrots. So we're just going to give them a quick peel. Now these recipes are just a framework for what you can do here. You can use any type of vegetable, and you can use any type of flavors. So if you like a certain spice or a certain flavor here, you can change that and develop your own flavors, but the process is all the same, essentially. And in general, the harder the vegetable, the longer it will take to cook in the water bath. So if you're using something like asparagus, which is fairly soft, it's going to cook very, very quickly, only maybe like 15 minutes or so. If you're using carrots like these, which are fairly firm, these are going to take between 1 and 2 hours to cook. So I'm just going to take the tops off these carrots here. You can leave them on if you wish. I'm going to take these off. So we've got the pan on heat now. We're going to add our butter. Now we're going to use unsalted butter, and we're going to add a little pinch of salt to that. Always using unsalted butter so we can control the amount of seasoning that we have in our food. And we're just going to let the butter cook on a medium heat until it just starts to brown. At that point, I'm going to stop the heat. I'm going to add the spices, and they're going to toast in that nut brown butter, and then that's ready to use on our carrots. And we're just going to let that infuse for a little while to get all that flavor into the butter before we add it to the carrots. So now we're going to add our carrots to another vacuum seal bag. And we're going to pour some of our madras curry butter into the pouch. You can already smell that's wonderfully fragrant, and that's going to permeate into the carrots. And again, you can use any kind of flavoring that you want, any kind of spices that you really like. You can do the same process with this, and any other fats as well. You can use oils for this. You can use beef tallow. You can use duck fat if you wish. Anything that's going to carry those spices and those flavors through and permeate into the vegetables. So now we have the carrots and the madras curry spice in the bag, and our madras butter made. We're going to go ahead and vacuum seal these. So now we have our madras spiced carrots ready to go in the vacuum pouch, and now we need to cook them. So they're going to go in at 85 degrees C, which is 185 degrees Fahrenheit, and these are going to cook for 45 minutes to an hour, and we'll get them when they're ready. So now we're going to prepare the glaze for the steak, and for this it's fairly simple. We have just 4 ingredients. We have some honey here, some Dijon mustard, some whole grain Dijon mustard, a little horseradish, and some cilantro. And if you don't have fresh horseradish near you, you can always use the prepared stuff, which is already grated and is kept in a brine. Just make sure you remove that brine and squeeze out the brine before you add the ingredients. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare the cilantro. So we're just going to pick the leaves. And this is something where, for example, if you wanted to use the leaves for the glaze and then the stalks for some aromatics inside your steak or whatnot, you can absolutely do that. Now I have the cilantro picked and washed, and we're going to go ahead and just chop it up very, very roughly. Again, just pulling in, slicing through, long slices so we don't bruise the leaves, which will ruin the flavor. All right, so now I'm going to grate the horseradish, and we're going to go ahead and peel the skin here, and then we're going to grate it, ready for the glaze. So we're going to use a microplane here. If you don't have one, you can use the small end of a box grater, absolutely fine. So there we have the horseradish, which has been grated, That goes into the bowl along with the cilantro. Now we're ready to add some honey here, which is going to balance the spicy flavors. And whole grain Dijon mustard. So now we have those 4 ingredients, and I'm just going to mix them together into a thick glaze. So now I'm going to remove the steak from the water bath. It's completely cooked now. And we're going to take it out. We're going to pat it dry because it would have picked up a little bit of excess moisture from being inside the bag. And then we're going to gently re-sear in the pan. And in goes the steak. Now very, very briefly. And we've got the color, we've got the Maillard reaction. All we're trying to do is drive off a little bit of moisture and get a crispy texture on the steak. That's all we're doing. That's it. Quick sear. Turn over. And I can feel already that this has gone super crispy. Very, very simple. And then the steak's ready. Now we're going to brush over with this, or spoon over with this cilantro glaze. And don't be shy with this, you can use quite a lot. So now we're going to take out our madras spiced carrots that have been cooking here, and I can feel that they've just got a little bit of give there, but they're not overcooked. This is sort of perfect, just how I want them. All right, so now we're going to slice the steak. As you can see there, the whole thing is medium rare, perfect texture throughout, no overcooking whatsoever. And that is fundamentally what this method is all about. It's about precision, it's about getting perfect texture and insulating that flavor, getting perfect flavor here as well. So there we have a sous vide strip steak with madras spiced carrots and cilantro and horseradish glaze. Okay, so now for vacuum packaging the pork. So we have the pork belly here, which is about 1.5 inches thick, 2 inches thick. We have bay leaf, 2 cloves of roasted garlic, and a sprig of thyme. And we're going to cook this in the bag first without searing it. We're going to do a post-sear here, so we're going to sear after the cooking process. We have 1 portion here. It's very important to know that if you're doing more than one portion, if it's a pork belly like this, sort of 1.5 inches, 2 inches thick, it will still take the same time to cook for a piece that's this long as it will for this part here. It's all about the thickness in sous vide as to how long it will take to cook and not the weight of the product. What we're going to do is we're going to season the pork belly, salt and pepper. Then I'm going to add the pork to the bag and the aromatics to one side, along with the roasted garlic cloves. And that's all we need: pork, bay leaf, roasted garlic, and thyme. And remember, just 1/4 or 25% of the amount of aromatics are needed for this cooking process. So now we have our pork belly and our aromatics in our bag, and we're going to start the sealing process. So we're going to place this inside the vacuum chamber, and we're going to place the bag over the seal bar, which is this bar here. And it's very, very important to make sure that the plastic is completely free of any debris or any aromatics, any salt, anything that may have got caught up in there, and that it's completely smooth and flat against the bar. If it's crunched up or folded, that can be a problem with the seal, and we need to make sure that it's sealed perfectly. Now I'm going to seal this on 100%, so I'm going to try and remove all of the air from the bag. And then we're going to place the lid down and allow the vacuum to work. Okay, so there we have our pork. It's been completely sealed. We have the aromatics here. If your aromatics are touching, you can just move them away slightly with your fingers. You should be able just to roll them away. And this is good and ready to be cooked now. So now the pork belly goes in, and we're going to cook this for 40 hours at 60 degrees Celsius. Moving on to the parsnip and horseradish puree. Now, In terms of using sous vide, purees are one of my favorite things to do as a chef using this method. Traditionally, you'd have to take the parsnips and blanch them in some sort of liquid, whether it be milk or cream or even water. And by doing that, you lose so much of the flavor. Here, using the sous vide method, we're going to manage to contain all of that flavor within that bag and capture every last part of it. So this is by far like one of my favorite things to do using this method. First thing we're going to do is we're going to peel the parsnips. Just going to peel them down. Okay, so now we're just going to trim the parsnips top and tail, get rid of the root end and the tail end. Okay, and now we're going to slice up the parsnips. Very, very important, as with other vegetables, that we keep everything the same size. We want these to cook at the same time. So just make sure that when you are slicing or dicing, that you're doing it at the same intervals down the vegetable. So when you're slicing this, it's not important what size to do it so much, but just to make sure that they're all even. So we have our parsnips here. Next thing we're going to do is going to grate some horseradish. We have another bag here, and we're going to add parsnips to that, and the horseradish. To that we're going to add salt and heavy cream. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to seal the parsnips. We just need to make sure that they're not bunched together like this. So it's very, very important that we take the bag and we spread out all the way down the bag so that they're going to cook quickly and evenly, like that. Okay, so now we're going to move on and finish the parsnip and horseradish puree. The parsnip's been cooking now for a couple of hours, and I can just feel that they're nice and tender. And they're ready to be pureed. So very simply, open up the bag and pour all of this mixture into the blender. So now the puree is done. Super, super smooth. I'm going to take this out of the blender and we're going to check the seasoning. We added salt in at the beginning. You've got the sweetness from the parsnips, a good kick from the horseradish, and the cream in there also makes it very, very rich. This is a great condiment for our pork. So now we're going to finish the pork. So you open up the bag here, drain the pork and the aromatics, and we need to dry the pork to make sure any excess moisture has been removed. And you can see already from this cooking that all of this wonderful fat here has all been retained. So now the pork is dry, and we're going to sear the pork on a medium to high heat, skin side down. So there we have the pork belly and the crisp skin, and now we're going to go ahead and slice that. So for this, instead of going through the skin, we're going to turn it the other way up, and we're going to go down. That will stop the skin from tearing. So there we have pork belly, the crispy skin. So we've captured all of the flavor, all of the fat in there, and it's going to be beautiful. The last part of this dish, we're going to do some quick roasted parsnips with some honey, some mustard, and a little thyme, which is going to give us a little balance in texture and in color. So there we have the crispy pork belly with horseradish, parsnip puree, and glazed parsnips. So now we're going to prepare the lime and pink peppercorn creme brulee. So it has a custard base, which we're going to cook sous vide, and then it has some marinated strawberries on top, lime, pink peppercorns, a little sugar, a little water, and we're going to bring this together now. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to add to a small pan the sugar, water, and then we're going to prepare the limes. So we need both the lime zest and the lime juice. So we're going to zest the limes. Now I'm using a microplane here. If you don't have one of these, you can use the fine grate on a box grater. Just make sure that we're not grating too far down into the lime, as the white part, which is the pith, contains all the bitter compounds in the fruit. Okay, so I have my lime zest. Just going to give these limes a good squeeze, get out the juice. We're going to add the lime juice to the water, the lime zest, and we're also going to add pink peppercorns. And we're going to bring this to a boil, and then we're going to leave this to cool to one side so that all the flavors come together. And then we can marinate the strawberries once this syrup is cooled. So now the syrup is cooled and we've enveloped all these flavors now. So we're just going to place them over the strawberries. And we're going to leave these to marinate now. So we just put them to one side, and then we can make the rest of the dish. So now we're going to make the base for the creme brulee. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to separate egg yolk and egg white. So now we have the egg yolks that we need for the dish. I'm just going to give them a little whisk through. And the next part is to get the cream base ready. So here I have heavy cream, and that's going into a saucepan. We have sugar, pink peppercorn, and we're going to take some vanilla seeds and we're going to scrape the vanilla seeds. So just with a small knife, we're going to cut down the center all the way down. If you don't use fresh vanilla, you can use vanilla extract. It's totally fine. And we're just going to remove all of the seeds here, scrape the seeds out, and place the seeds in. I'm going to put the pod in as well, because we're going to strain this through, and all the seeds will come through when we strain, and we'll leave the pod there. We need a pinch of salt and the zest of 2 limes. And these are wonderful flavors together. The pink peppercorn, the lime, vanilla. So now we have all of the ingredients in with our cream base, and we're just going to scald the cream. So we're going to bring it up to a boil. As soon as we see it rise, we're going to turn off the heat and leave it to cool. So now I need to bring the cream mixture back up to 70 degrees Celsius or 158 degrees Fahrenheit. And we're there now at 70. So then we're going to strain the mixture through a sieve or a chinois, fine meshed. Now we're going to temper the cream into the egg yolks, which is going to allow them to mix together without curdling. So if I add all this cream all at once, it's going to cook the eggs essentially, and you'll get scrambled egg. So what we're going to do is just temper in. I'm going to add a very, very small amount of the cream and mix through. And I'm going to keep doing this to bring the egg yolks up to temperature before I mix more and more. So now I have the custard base set, and I'm going to allow this to rest for a little while, just until the bubbles dissipate. So we've whisked up some bubbles here, and we want to make sure that it's completely smooth and flat when we cook. Here I have 4 mason jars. And we're just going to fill the jars just below the rim. Now we're going to place the lid on. And there's no need to do this too tight, because you'll have trouble getting them off at the end. So we're going to just loosely pull these together, and then the vacuum or the pressure from the water will actually allow them to seal very well. And now these are ready to go into the water bath. So here they go. So now the brulees have cooked, we're just going to remove them now and we're going to finish them. So they come out of the water and we're going to leave them at room temperature until they're cool to the touch, and then we can place them into some ice water or refrigerate them further to allow them to be completely fully set. Now we've allowed this to cool, it's nice and cooled, and the custard is set, so we just remove the lid and there we have the custard, it's completely set. So now we're going to add the sugar evenly over the custard base, and then we're going to take a blowtorch and very carefully So now just to finish plating, so we have our brulee set, and now we're going to add these wonderful strawberries, and we're going to add them just to one side for a bit of colour and for a bit of texture. And finally, we're going to finish with a little bit of fresh lime zest. So there we have the lime and pink peppercorn creme brulee.